Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar channel of the Association of Certified eDiscovery Specialists. My name is Mike Quadraro, and I'm the president of ACEDS. Today, we are joined by our fantastic partner, Microsoft, for a webinar entitled Learn How Microsoft Legal Defensibly Wins by Using Advanced eDiscovery in Microsoft 365. As you know, Microsoft is a leader in the cloud-based office and organizational productivity software market. Their well-known solutions are designed to help users achieve more with innovative Office applications, intelligent cloud services, and world-class security. And their advanced eDiscovery solution continues to build on their commitment to providing not just standard Office apps, but real eDiscovery and data management tools as well. Before we get started today, please know that we love questions and we're happy to take your questions. You can submit your questions using the Q&A widget at the bottom of the screen. All questions are anonymous. Also, if you'd like a copy of the slide deck from today's presentation, you can download that from the resource widget also at the bottom of the screen. Without further delay, I am pleased to introduce our presenters today. Rachi Messing is a senior program manager at Microsoft in the Corporate, External, and Legal Affairs Department based out of their Israel office. And Caroline Shin is the senior product marketing manager for Microsoft 365 eDiscovery and Audit. She has worked in security and compliance at Microsoft for almost 4 years. And I will now turn it over to Caroline to take care of the presentation. Caroline, take it away.
Thank you, Michael. We're super happy to be here to talk to the ACEDS community. Based on our conversations that we've had with customers, analysts, and partners, we see that there's an opportunity to provide innovations around how we can help our customers do eDiscovery more efficiently and cost effectively. So, of course, while I can talk to you the advanced eDiscovery capabilities and what we offer, I actually felt it was, it would be much more valuable if it came from our very first customer, our own Microsoft legal department, and to have them talk to you guys about how they leverage our advanced eDiscovery capabilities and also provide some best practices and tips and tricks. So to help me with this, I've invited Rachi Messing here to join us. Rachi, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights. I know that we often look to our legal teams to provide us feedback on our capabilities, but zooming out a little bit, I think what you're really helping us do is understand the business challenges and the business problems that our customers have and how we can actually help solve them with our eDiscovery technology. So before we can get into the technology, can you share a little bit more with the folks here around the challenges that our own Microsoft legal department faces and how that actually impacts Microsoft? So for instance, we talk about this all the time. What we hear from our customers is that, data is growing exponentially, regulations are evolving. It's, making it super challenging to manage risk and compliance within an organization. And of course, on top of that, data is, different types of data is being created. And that's also creating additional challenges for eDiscovery. So we'd love to hear from your perspective, what our own legal department what are the challenges that that our own legal department faces, and how are you guys set up to actually solve this?
So first of all, Caroline, thank you so much to you and ACEDS for having me join today. It's really great to be here and to be able to spend some time talking about the work that my team does. I've been dealing with eDiscovery and compliance of electronic data for 20 years, and we're definitely seeing that the combination of ever-increasing data volumes together with the increasing regulations and privacy concerns make dealing with eDiscovery much more complex than it's ever been. So, my team is part of the litigation organization within Microsoft. And overall, our department probably looks pretty similar to the way that many of our customers are engaged. You can see that we have, broken up into teams of attorneys who are really responsible for managing the litigation, for making sure that outside counsel is properly engaged, and really the overall case strategy. Then we've got our paralegals, who are the ones who are really managing the day-to-day, coordinating all of the logistics with the clients, with outside counsel and with all of the custodians within the cases. Really, they are the project managers. They're the ones who are leading the charge and making sure that everything is staying on track. And then we've got our associate paralegals who are really in the trenches, dealing with a lot of the day-to-day work and making sure that, everything from local data collections to coordinating with the custodians to make sure that they're actually available. All of those different tasks are taking place. And then you get to my actual team, which are the eDiscovery program managers. And we are responsible for everything data or technical related that goes on within a case. So my team is managing all of the technical aspects of eDiscovery, whether that be eDiscovery within Microsoft 365, within Office 365 in the cloud, or any of our on-prem or any other technical details, all the way from the collections through the review process and production. So we're really involved in absolutely every aspect of discovery. If you look at what our team is dealing with in general, the litigation team, our team handles all litigation, including employment, patent, antitrust, commercial, general litigation, as well as regulatory matters and all of the regulations and all of the regulatory bodies that our company deals with. So, for example, we may deal with helping to manage a non-compete situation or answering a specific request from the Department of Justice or any other international regulator. Just to give you a quick example, our team just finished dealing with a HSR request that relates to a recent acquisition that we did, where we had to actually be running daily searches against 8 different custodians and collecting data, pulling data, and analyzing that data in real time, working with counsel and the regulators to make sure that everyone was on the same page and had a full understanding of the inner workings of the acquisition and how it was proceeding, to the point where the regulators were able to give the okay to let the acquisition proceed. Another case that we just finished was dealing with multiple patent suits that were all somewhat related but somewhat different, and having to manage all the different complexities around that, all the different queries that we were dealing with, a mix of different custodians that related to some of the different patents but overlap between them, current and former employees of Microsoft, varying date ranges, all kind of the standard complexity that eDiscovery practitioners need to deal with. All of these had to be managed by my team in a very structured, repeatable, defensible process. So it's the type of organization that you would expect, and the type of work that you would expect from a company as big and as broad as Microsoft, in all of the different discovery aspects that we have to deal with.
That's great. So clearly, Microsoft, we handle some very complex cases. I think it would be helpful if you can share with the audience around what's that, talk a little bit more about that principled approach that your team takes in order to support these complex cases. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It has to come from a principled, organized method of approaching discovery. If you don't take that type of approach, then it'll never work. Whether you're a small company or large company, you have to take the right approach and the right process around your discovery process. So Microsoft is a cloud-first company, obviously. Part of our mission is to make sure that everyone is able to do everything that they need to be able to do to empower everyone in the cloud. And we really began our digital transformation to the cloud almost 10 years ago, starting to move data into the cloud even before Office 365 was called Office 365, starting to get data there and starting to look at how we could properly manage productivity there. But that created challenges for the eDiscovery team around how do we manage eDiscovery in the cloud. And one of the things that we found very quickly was that the ability to do things in place was really, really, really going to be very valuable. And that's really what we've relied on, is this ability to do more in place as the systems evolved. As more capabilities have been adding into the system, as Office 365 grew into Microsoft 365 and broadening the breadth of all the different platforms that it's able to manage, what we found is that we're able to do a whole lot and a whole lot more than we were able to do by doing things in place, by focusing on what we're able to do within the system without having to pull data out. So, I think that it really comes down to three different areas here. The first thing is that by doing things in place, what we've seen is a reduction in risk. We've seen that we're able to make sure that the data stays secure, that data that doesn't have to leave our premises, the broader premises of our tenant, of the cloud, that we control, that we're in charge of, the same way that a customer controls their tenant. Being able to make sure that that data is staying in that secure environment for as long as possible is really, really important. Now, there's always going to be some set of data that has to leave the environment, but the key is minimizing that data and making sure that only what absolutely has to come out is the data that comes out. And through that, what we've seen is, in addition to reducing the risk and increasing the security, is a cost reduction. We've actually seen that the amount of money that we spend on our discovery, on our eDiscovery, has come drastically down through this approach, by not having to copy data, not having to have data sitting in multiple places, and reducing the amount of data that we have to pay for processing and hosting and the other fees that are typically associated with eDiscovery. So all of that has helped us by keeping that data in place. And one of the things that we weren't necessarily expecting, but that actually was a benefit that we saw, was that we actually became a lot more efficient. We were actually able to get the data out to the people who needed to see it in a much, much quicker way than we ever were before.
Got it. And then I heard a stat being thrown around that sometimes over 90% of a customer's content is non-responsive. Is that what you saw within Microsoft as well? And is that where a lot of the cost savings have come from?
Yeah, absolutely. When we would typically export the data out and send it out, we were dealing with lots and lots of data that has absolutely nothing to do with the case, but had to be searched in order to make sure that we were getting to that volume that we were actually worried about and had to get reviewed. And what we see is in our environment is actually a lot higher than 90% non-relevant. Our typical call rate on our cases is much closer to 98%, where we're able to get it down to only the data that is potentially relevant within a case. So being able to really get that data down to only exactly what we want to send out the door that is potentially relevant is really, really important. And that is the in-place story that we're dealing with.
Got it. And just taking a step back for a second, we know that customers have been doing things a certain way for a very long time. Can you talk a little bit about what they're doing and what are the challenges to, doing eDiscovery in that traditional way where they may be sort of trying to export all that content out and then doing review with outside counsel? What's your advice in general for these customers, and how can some of our advanced eDiscovery capabilities help?
Yeah, so I think before even going there, it would help to understand a little bit about some of the capabilities within Office 365 and Microsoft 365, specifically towards eDiscovery and realizing how those impact what customers are actually able to do and why it makes sense. If you look at it from the perspective of the EDRM, the Electronic Discovery Reference Model, then you can see that we are able to manage a lot of the pieces within the platform itself. So especially, typically people break out the EDRM to the left side and the right side of the EDRM. When you look at the left side, the information governance pieces, being able to manage the sensitivity around data, being able to manage and protect the data in the right way, classify the data in the right way, using a lot of those tools to then feed into the eDiscovery pieces, where then you're able to do your identification and your searching and really get down to start figuring out what data you actually want and, more importantly, preserving it in the right way. And we'll dig a little bit more into the preservation pieces, but then also adding on a lot of the features within the advanced eDiscovery tools that allow me to do a lot of the deeper processing and the some of the review and early case assessment there. It is really, really important. So when I look at the tools that advanced eDiscovery in Microsoft 365 allows us to do, it's really about that custodian identification, being able to identify the data correctly, being able to make sure that it's preserved correctly, make sure that it's able to be properly searched and indexed, and that I'm able to identify things based off of metadata and all of the different aspects of the data that I want to be able to search and I want to be able to identify there. And then being able to add on top of that, a lot of the analytics to better understand the data, to have a better sense of what's in the data. And all of that, all of those different pieces really allow me to then go and really get a much better understanding and a much better approach to minimization of the data. And you have to do that because while customers typically, the traditional approach was always identify whatever the data that I want to have, and then go ahead and copy all that data out, pull it to whatever, whether it's from an on-prem system, a cloud system, go ahead and pull all the data to a central location where then I'll go ahead and search it. I'll process it, I'll search it, I'll do everything that I need to do to it. But as the data is growing and as more and more data ends up in the cloud, it becomes very, very difficult to say that I'm going to just pull all that data out, right? You start hitting that choke point of I'm no longer sitting where I can just plug a hard drive directly into my server and make a direct copy of that data. I now have to rely on all of the different pieces of the cloud infrastructure, and all of that, quite frankly, it's just not as performant as you see when you're dealing with data you're sitting next to the data in a data center. So what we see is it creates a choke point. It creates an area where if I'm going to try to pull everything out, it's just going to take much, much longer and be much more frustrating to both the people who have to manage that process and the users, the attorneys who are waiting to look at that data. So being able to then, really move away from that approach, take a little bit of a different approach of a shift in, again, in place, being able to do my initial culling, my initial searching, and as well as layering on top of that some of the analytics is really, really important. And just as an example, you can see that, the graph that we're showing right now is the growth of data that we've seen at Microsoft per custodian over the last 10 years. What we've seen is that 10 years ago, our average custodian was dealing with about 4 gigs of usable data, of data that the end user created that we needed to search. So not counting any system files or data coming from the installation of programs or anything like that. It was manageable. I can look at it and say, I'm going to pull that data out potentially for all of my custodians. But over the last 10 years, we've seen over a 20 times increase in the size of that data per custodian. And this is the numbers through last financial year. We're almost done with this current financial year, and we're seeing it having grown even more. So as that data is growing, it's going to continue to grow. The ability to do things in place and not try to pull all of that data out initially, there's no other approach that you can take. Now, what's interesting is as we've seen this data grow, we internally at Microsoft, we made the shift from outsourcing everything, right? Doing that, copying the data out and processing it in a tool that we would be able to then search outside of the cloud environment, to shifting to doing things in place, using core eDiscovery, using the tools to help from the initial data minimization, and then the addition of utilizing advanced eDiscovery when that became available. What we've seen is that we have been able to reduce our costs by over 85% during that time through the use of both the core eDiscovery tools as well as the advanced eDiscovery tools to help minimize the data that's coming out, all being done while the data is sitting where it rests, right? The data doesn't have to be moved out of the environment, out of the different workloads where it lives. So data is increasing, costs are coming down. It's a win-win, especially when you look at it as with the addition of the fact that we are keeping that data secure and able to manage that data even faster. So I thought that maybe it would be helpful to give a sense a little bit about what the typical case at Microsoft looks like. You know, what are we dealing with here? So the average case at Microsoft starts off with the preservation. Again, we're not copying that data out. It's staying where it is. The data that's in Exchange stays in Exchange. The data that's in OneDrive or SharePoint or whatever the other tools that the users are using. So from a productivity standpoint, we're not disrupting the end user because, again, Office 365 is built as a productivity tool. It's not a eDiscovery tool. It's a productivity tool that has compliance and eDiscovery features layered on top of it really effectively, but the main goal of the applications is to provide productivity for the end users. So when you look at it from that perspective, being able to preserve that data in place, not having to copy it out, not disrupting the end user, we preserve a lot of data. Our average case is close to 2.5 terabytes, if not more, of data that's being preserved. But then after that initial preservation, we start talking to the users, the custodians, working with outside counsel to figure out, okay, who are the users that we actually need to search? And let's scope it down to that volume that then actually, typically, this is the volume that would have gone through processing. But we don't have to go through processing because that data is already indexed, it's already searchable, and we're able to get to that data and search it in place where we then minimize that data down to just the data that's hitting on the various different search terms or the different date parameters or whatever criteria that we've worked out with counsel of what data is in play here. We're then able to layer on top of that our advanced eDiscovery analytics to help to really reduce that data down even more, using the tools to look at only the most inclusive emails. So we apply email threading, really just looking at how do we get to a single version of unique data for everything that has to be reviewed. And then when that data is done, going through all those analytics and we have a better understanding of the data, we're able to then get it ready and have it reviewed either in the smaller cases or when we're still in the early case assessment stage. We can do some of that in place in the tool itself, or exporting that data out to go to a third-party review vendor to be hosted in a third-party review tool where the data is already processed, so we're not paying for processing again. We're able to get that data in a format that is organized, and we're able to batch it out for our reviewers where they're able to make the most consistent decisions possible in a prioritized fashion, where they're able to get through it as efficiently as they can. And really what that allows us to do is not only save money on the processing side, but also see more efficiencies, paying less in attorney review dollars when it comes to the actual review process that the data has to undergo.
Great. This is super powerful. So going back to what I talked about earlier on, it's really all about business impact. And this is powerful to show how you can help an organization or how an organization can reduce costs by doing things more efficiently. So now that we understood the benefits, can you tell me a little bit more about the how? What's the workflow look like? For instance, we all know that when we talk to our customers, they're all undergoing a digital transformation, but some have that data on-prem. So what's that workflow look like at Microsoft, considering we also have on-prem data as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it all starts with preservation, right? The question is, even if I have some data on-prem and internally at Microsoft, we may be cloud first, but we do still see that only about 85 to 90% of the data that we're dealing with is in the cloud and is able to be preserved in place. We still have between 10 to 15% of our data that's coming from other sources, whether it be, we're the ones who are developing Exchange, so we still have Exchange servers on-prem that some of our users are actually actively on because we need to be able to make sure that we're designing and maintaining these servers in the same way that our clients are. So we do still have data that exists within on-prem data centers, while the majority of that data is in the cloud. So what that allows us to do from a preservation standpoint is we're able to preserve the data automatically. So as soon as a case starts, we find out who the users are on hold. We have an automated system that we are able to take that list of the users who have been placed on hold in any given manner and automatically put various different locations. So all of their chats, all of their Yammer data, all of their Teams data, all of their email, all of their OneDrive data, their Sway, all of that information automatically gets preserved right away. Then we also will go out and start doing custodian interviews. We'll talk to the users. We'll find out what of certain data types that are a little bit more general, such as SharePoint sites. Well, I might have access, or the end user might have access to 30 different SharePoint sites, but from a litigation perspective, when trying to identify where the relevant or potentially relevant data is, they usually can narrow that down and say, well, really, I'm only active in these 10 sites, and I only really have data that I create or that I'm responsible for in these 3. So we're able to really narrow down and then on a reactive basis, place the data on hold and preserve it in some of those other data source locations. We're still able to do it in place, but we're not going to do it automatically. We then also will collect the data from all of the various different non-Office 365 locations as appropriate. We'll store it in Azure. We've built a litigation repository that we're able to manage and store the data for the custodians. And then when we start looking at the workflow, we can see here that data that's been collected by the associate paralegals and working its way into Azure, we're able to integrate that non-Microsoft 365 data source into the advanced eDiscovery workflow. So we're really able to marry together the Office 365 data, the data is coming from Microsoft 365, with the non-Microsoft 365 data, where then it'll go through the same exact process. So we're able to do the same searches. We're able to have it undergo that same indexing levels. We're then able to deal with any errors, any data that still needs remediation, decryption, things like that, of non-Microsoft encryption sources, run all of the analytics, have that data, go through any early case assessment steps, and then really just get that data into a format that is ready to go through a deeper review if that's required. So from a workflow perspective, it really marrying those two things up, the non-Microsoft 365 data sources with the Microsoft 365 data sources, allows us to have a predictable, comprehensive approach to our eDiscovery workflow. And it's really been quite effective. What we've seen over the last few years is really that we are able to do all of this at scale with a pretty small team. When you compare the size of our team to a lot of the expectations of what a company like Microsoft would have managing their eDiscovery, it's really a streamlined, really, really effective team. My team members, my coworkers are really good at their jobs. They're able to manage this process effectively at scale through a lot of the automation tools and using the tools in place that we're able to utilize. And you can see that, like I've said, we're able to reduce that data down. We're able to make sure that the data is properly preserved. We're able to save the company costs, and it's all being done in a defensible manner.
Awesome. So can we double click on defensibility for a second? So we know that in the legal field, it's all about reputation and reputation of the organization and the reputation of our legal professionals. How do you ensure a defensible process? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And a lot of people throw around the term defensibility and making sure that, your eDiscovery tool is defensible. And really what it comes down to is defensibility is about the process. It's not necessarily about the tools. Having a great tool absolutely makes it easier to have a defensible process, but that alone does not make your process defensible. It's about how you actually use the tool. It's about the various different processes and documentation that you wrap around that usage. It's about making sure that you, the end user, have a good understanding, that you're able to explain the tool. You're able to understand the various different steps that the tool is going through. When someone asks you a question and you need to be able to defend it, you need to be able to make sure that you have the proper knowledge around what you've been doing and make the proper defensible explanation there. Part of that is making sure that you have a good process around managing exceptions. The Office 365 index and the index that's taking place across of all of Microsoft 365, it's really good, but it's not perfect. So there is going to be data that is going to come out that just isn't able to be indexed, file types that are not searchable by the Microsoft 365 eDiscovery tools. So you need to make sure that you've got a good process and a good understanding about what that data is, what the various different types of data that you're going to see, and how you manage that data correctly. When you look at overall, what we see internally at Microsoft is on average about 2% of our data is not searchable by the default index. Now, that doesn't mean that it's fully unsearchable. For a lot of that data, it means that it might be a Word document where 99% of that document is fully searchable, but it has a picture in it that is not searchable. It might be an email where the email is searchable, but it had a password-protected zip file attached to it that thereby made that specific file unsearchable. So we see that on average, it's about 2%, give or take, of the data, but actually by volume. So it's 2% by the count, right? If you look at it as a percentage of the number of items that exist for a specific custodian. But typically, by volume, it's actually a little bit higher because the files that are unindexed or partially indexed tend to be larger. So we see that that's actually about 8% of the data is not actually able to be indexed. And before we started using advanced eDiscovery, that was the volume that we actually, no matter what, had to pull out of the system in order to run it through another tool to make it searchable and be able to get in and understand what that data is dealing with. Now, we've added on the ability to do some deep processing within advanced eDiscovery, where that data is able to get reprocessed in addition to the main Office and Microsoft 365 index. That data is now able to go through a deeper indexing. As soon as I add a custodian to the case, it submits that data that was not indexed by the main index into this deeper index, And what we find now is that it's less than half of a percent of the data that actually continues to have any exceptions. So again, reducing that volume, reducing that data set, and then only that, we then have a process around that, which adds to the defensibility of the process. Yes, the tool will have exceptions. As long as you're managing those exceptions correctly, then you're able to then have a good claim to making sure that you are doing things defensively.
Great. So now at this point, people are probably really curious about the product. What do we deliver in advanced eDiscovery? It'd be really great if you can walk us through the product and provide your lens around, what are the capabilities that our internal legal team finds most exciting about our advanced eDiscovery capabilities?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Let's jump right into a demo and take a look at a couple of these features.
Great.
So here we are in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, and you can see that I have available to me on the left-hand side my eDiscovery tools. We're going to go into a case that I've already created, and what we can see is that I actually already have some custodians added in, but I'm going to add some new ones into this case. Now, what's really cool is that when I go ahead and add in a new custodian, what it will do is it will search and look up to confirm that this user is actually part of my organization. And then it will actually automatically go out and start to identify data locations that are associated with this user. So you can see it automatically finds the user's Exchange, OneDrive. If I don't want to be searching OneDrive, I can always uncheck those. I can come in here and I can find and identify additional data sources. So for example, I can come into Diego and I can say, show me all of the different teams that Diego is a part of. It will then allow me to select whichever ones I want to include. And what this will do is it'll associate these specific teams with the custodian, with Diego, and allow me to do some of the deep indexing against this specific custodian. Another example is I can come in and for Adele, I can see what are the Yammer sites that Adele is part of. So she is a member of various different Yammer sites. I can go ahead and select the ones that are actually important and that are potentially relevant here. I could do the same thing with SharePoint sites. I could even add shared mailboxes to the custodian. When I go in, I can then choose whether or not to actually preserve the data for these custodians. So I can go ahead and place that user on hold, and it'll preserve in place all of the different data sources that I've selected for these specific custodians. I've now gone ahead and you can see that it's starting the indexing against the custodians that I've now added. If I want to, I can go in and confirm that the users are actually on hold. But what I'm going to actually do here is I am going to go in and start my searching. Now, I've already gone ahead and created some searches, but just to show you the experience, I can do a specific search. I can come in and select whichever custodians are going to be subject to this search. If I wanted to, I could add in additional locations. I can even say select all, which will search my entire organization. Now, normally here at Microsoft, we don't have a need in most cases to search the entire organization, but there are instances where that becomes really important, especially when trying to identify who leaked something or where you've got a need to search the entire organization, all the SharePoint sites, all the Exchange email, just everything across the tenant, and I'm able to get in and search all of those. I can then come in and add keywords. So if I wanted to, I can use Boolean language. I can, for example, say I want to find where it says sales and the word marketing, or I can use a wildcard. I can come in and I can put in a product number. I can put in someone's actual email address. I've got all kinds of different conditions that I can add in here in terms of what I'm actually searching. So for example, I could say I want to search only data that's between certain dates, and then I can go ahead and execute that search. Now, what I'm going to do, that search will take typically between 5 to 30 seconds to run. I'm going to go into a search that I ran a little bit earlier, and I can see that I can actually generate statistics about where the data was. I can see on the individual keywords that I ran, how many hits did I have for each individual keyword. I can see which specific locations did those keywords hit on. So a lot of different information that helps me to figure out what exactly I'm searching, and again, start to minimize and narrow the data, because all of this data is already indexed and it's all ready to go. Now, one of the things that we talked about is the importance of managing your errors and being able to see what the data sets that I potentially will have to run through with some remediation. And what I can see here is against all of the data in my entire tenant, I actually did have about 10 errors that were found. I can then choose which ones of them do I want to actually go through the process of remediating. I can then, it'll kick off a process to export that data out, where then I can do whatever I need to do to fix that data and then re-upload it back into the case. Now, the one piece that I can then do after I've gone ahead and run a search is I can come in and I can say I want to add that data to a review set. A review set is going to lock that data down and allow me to do additional filtering against that data, additional early case assessment work against that data. I can go ahead, and one of the important things here is that I can do conversation retrieval. So what this will do, if I ran a keyword search and it hit on a single message in a instant message conversation in Teams, it will actually go ahead and pull back all of the rest of the conversation to make sure that I get it in context, and I can go ahead and add that data to a review set. I've already gone ahead and added the data to the review set here. And by the way, it's all done with a jobs tab where I can track the progress of any of the different activities that I'm doing, and then also have the history to be able to go back and see what was done in individual case. But I'm going to go into this review set that I've created, and I can see here that it brings back about 30,000 items. Now, those 30,000 items is because it actually breaks apart all of the individual emails and the attachments, and it gives me a very complete view of how much data would I have to review, or how much data can I now submit to analytics. I can come in and I can run my analytics. I can see some reporting against the data to understand a little bit about the data that was brought in. I've got various different aspects of, for example, being able to bring in that non-Office 365 data to integrate it into the case. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at the results of my analytics, because one of the things that the analytics does is it identifies duplicate data from various different either custodians or from their SharePoint data, wherever that data might be. I'm able to very quickly click on this for review query, and you can see it knocks that data down to 7,457 items, which is the total data that is unique within this case. I can then go in and I can select any of the various different data to see what exactly it says, including my Teams or Yammer data. I can see that it's looking at it in a threaded view where I can see the conversation. I see that I've got some ability to tag here. I can run automated classifiers against the data to identify potentially privileged information. I can come in and do some individual tagging against the data. I've got the ability to see a rich view of the data. So for example, if I come in here to an Excel file, I can actually see that data in a native view. The native view will not let me edit it, but it will let me see any kind of formulas or anything else that I need to see. I can also, for example, I have the ability to come in and do some basic annotations. So I can come in here and see that if I want to, I can run a redaction. I can select whatever data I want to redact, and then I can save this as a PDF, so that way, when I actually export it out, I'm protecting any of that sensitive or privileged information that should not leave my tenant. And that is one of the ways that I can do some pre-work on the review side to make sure that, again, I'm reducing the risk that my company potentially is at by exporting data that doesn't need to be exported. So once I'm able to go through this tagging process, the viewing process, whatever I might need to do, I can also select multiple documents if I needed to and tag all of them at once. I can then come in and I can either download individual items, or I can run an export. And when I run the export, I can either export out all of my data or just some of the data, the ones that I've selected. I will export this data out in a processed format. So it's got all of the extracted text associated with it. I can have a metadata load file that has about 100 or so, actually it's over 100 different fields of metadata that I will export out with the data. If I want to, I can include any of the tagging information. If I want to just run a report, then I don't have to actually export the native files themselves. I'll just get the report, I'll just get the load file, but I can actually export all of that data, and it comes as individual messages, and any of the individual documents that were stored on SharePoint or OneDrive or wherever they are. I can make sure that I'm getting my extracted text, including any data from images that was OCR'd, because one of the things that the deep indexing and the processing does is it will actually OCR all of the images in the collection. And then when I export it, I can export it directly into Azure, either to a Azure location that Microsoft provides temporarily in order that I can then download it, or directly if my tenant has their own Azure environment, I can export it there, where I obviously would have more control over what is actually happening to that data in the long term. So all of these various different tools are really, really valuable in terms of, again, going from that initial workload of where all that data is, and then getting it all the way through that summarization process. So just to summarize a few of the things that we just went through that really are the most important things within advanced eDiscovery for my team, that ability to identify the data, figure out what teams or what SharePoint sites or whatever it may be that has to do with each individual custodian, the ability to do deep indexing, have that processing already done as soon as you add a custodian, the ability to do statistical sampling within the tool to make sure that you are actually finding the right data and that you're not missing anything, the advanced features that have been added in around conversation reconstruction from Teams and Yammer, so that way you can, first of all, pull in all of that data, make sure that you understand the context of the conversation and see it the same way that the end user saw it threaded together. The ability to do some level of in-place review, to do redaction, all of those things are really, really important and enable my team to be able to get our jobs done so much easier and so much more effectively.
Great. So thank you for that. That was really great to see. In addition to the stuff that we have in market today, I know that our own legal teams, including yourself, work very closely with our own engineering team, providing very honest and necessary feedback to help fine-tune our capabilities. Can you share with the audience just a little bit about what you and the legal team is most excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a very, very close relationship with the product team, with the engineering team. We do a weekly sync with them where both we provide them with ideas and thoughts around the products. They come and show us the products that they're thinking about developing. And as they're going through development. So, as the initial customer that is able to experience these things, we take very seriously our role as the customer exemplar, the representative of the industry, and making sure that the things that are being designed are really going to be the things that are most effective and help eDiscovery practitioners do their job. So there's a couple things that are being worked on that we're really excited about. The first and foremost, and this is something that the team is always working on, is additional support for additional workloads. You know, Microsoft on the productivity side is always working on developing new tools to make users productive and give them the most effective tools for them to get their job done. And the eDiscovery team is always working to make sure that the eDiscovery and compliance tools are effective for those various different new data workloads. So, you know, as new workloads are appearing, as they continue to be developed, the eDiscovery team from a product side is working to make sure that my team is able to support our regulatory and compliance needs in doing the eDiscovery process. The second thing is the additional support around modern attachments that, you know, as users, especially now, you know, Teams has just exploded in terms of usage and the number of users who are in Teams, working in Teams, not just for video conferencing, but actually working as a team in Teams, working with documents, working with surveys, and working with different ways to communicate. All of those different things, and the Teams product team is constantly working again on enhancing those things, especially as people are more and more looking at a long-term remote work scenario. So the eDiscovery team is really working on a lot of different tools to make the eDiscovery experience supporting those various different tools and being able to properly identify and search and get into that data, including, as I said, modern attachments when you're sending links to documents, not the documents themselves, to be able to properly preserve and search those links, those linked documents, and make sure that that data is going to be properly preserved.
Thanks, Rachi. And I know that the product team really appreciates, you know, your team and your feedback, and it only just makes our product better. So we appreciate that, and appreciate your perspective on the stuff that's coming up and what you're excited about. We're about to complete and be at the end of our webinar. Can you just share some final thoughts with our audience and parting words before we end?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you again for having me, and hopefully this has been valuable to the customers. But really just a couple of key points. The first is, again, it's a tool that has to be used appropriately, that being able to utilize the features to minimize that data in place, to be able to look at how do I reduce my costs in the use of other tools. I still am going to need to use other tools in the overall workflow, but how do I get the most value out of those tools? How do I get the most value out of my existing investments by using Microsoft 365 correctly? Again, defensibility, it's all about process. It's making sure that I've got the right knowledge and I'm understanding what is going on and staying on top of the features as newer features are added in. Being able to do things through automation. PowerShell, which is a scripting language that allows me to apply automation on the back end, is really powerful and allows me to do things, especially in core eDiscovery, that I would not necessarily be able to do, or that I'm able to do, but I'm able to do them a lot faster and scalable by doing them via PowerShell. And then taking advantage of the analytics and the various different pieces of advanced eDiscovery to, again, better understand the data, have a better ability to find my data properly, and to minimize that data even more effectively. And then last but not least is be on the lookout as new applications arise and new challenges appear. How do I handle them? Just because the core and the advanced eDiscovery tools don't necessarily support everything today, that doesn't mean that there's not a way to still utilize the tools and to take advantage of the capabilities. You just have to think through and make sure that your process is properly designed around that to make the best use and to manage those tools appropriately.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Rachi, for your time, and a big thank you to our audience today for your time as well. You know, our goal and our intention was to share with you our experiences from our first customer, from our own Microsoft CELA or our own Microsoft legal team, and from a customer, you know, clearly, as Rachi explained earlier, with very complex needs. We hope it was super valuable for you guys to hear about their experiences with advanced eDiscovery, and I hope that this has opened up for you to learn more about our capabilities. With that said, we'll pause and open up the floor for any questions and stay here to answer them.
Mike, questions?
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, I was on mute and talking to myself. We've got dozens of questions. We are clearly not going to get to them. We will figure out with Microsoft how to get to some of those questions. So, Rachi, really quick, we've got a few minutes. The first question up is simply, do you have any top tips for filtering data, right? An organization is saying they get a lot of hits on sort of daily content reports and stuff like that. How are you best filtering data in advance?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So if you find that you're constantly getting those types of hits, you can absolutely add not clauses into your queries by default. You can also, once the data has been moved into a review set, then using the sender and the domain filters to really figure out what data does not need to be included in the export, and basically tagging those files not to include them, so that way you can exclude them when it comes time to export by creating a search. So using the searching in the right way to be able to filter down that data and yeah, absolutely remove it if it's not going to contain relevant data, get rid of it.
Great. Next question, really quick. How are you managing legal hold?
So today, I'm assuming that the question is on the hold notification side, and we are using a third-party tool right now for managing our hold notifications that we've been using for a number of years. Today, we have our paralegals actually enter the matter information, the hold information into the tool. We export out a daily report, which then we have a script that picks it up and actually ingests it into Office 365, checks to see if a matter is already there. If it is, then great. If not, it creates the matter and will actually add the hold policy and place the locations that have been identified as part of the script operation onto the hold. So that is done on a daily basis, and then we can also have the ability to manually go in and add someone to holds if it's a urgent matter and it can't wait for the daily process to take place.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rachi. One more question we've got time for, and then we'll wrap it up. Does in-place discovery require more individual staff time for search, preservation, and review? If so, was this factored into your cost-saving metrics?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. It was factored into our calculations, not necessarily on a case basis, but on a overall what our metrics are for our costs, and what the metrics are then across all the custodians, dividing up the time. Obviously, that isn't 100%. We can't get that 100% down because of differences in sizes of custodians and things like that. But absolutely, those were taken into consideration, and we found that we actually did not need any additional staff than what we were doing before in terms of once we moved away from the outsource everything. And more on an IT side and actually adding some legal process and legal thought into what we're doing. So again, it is a dedicated eDiscovery PM team that we have within the litigation group. It's not within IT. And that group, size-wise, has stayed basically the same for a long time, with the exception of we recently added an engineer to help us with some other outside of Office 365 processes. But otherwise, the team size has remained steady for quite a while. So.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much, Rachi. We have reached the top of the hour, so unless you've got anything else, I'm going to close it up. Any closing thoughts, Rachi?
Just thank you to ACEDS and thank you to everyone who attended. And we'll try to get answers to a lot of, I know there's almost 40 questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, so we'll try to get some answers out as soon as we can.
Yeah, we'll be able to digest those answers as we go forward. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today on the ACEDS webinar channel. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Rachi. And, of course, our great friends at Microsoft for a great presentation today. Please visit aceds.org for a complete list of our upcoming webinars. Have a great day, everyone.